Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to all of those who are joining from the West Coast. Thank you all for being part of today's web forum. I'm Cynthia Benz, and I'm going to be the moderator for today's web forum, and I'm joined by David Davenport, who many of you know is the project manager for PMC's PCORI Engagement Award. We expect the program to last approximately 90 minutes, and we hope that you'll actively participate in the discussion portion. In addition to those on the agenda listed as guest speakers, we just wanted to take a minute to give you a sense of who the other participants are on the webinar. We have 70 individuals who are going to be joining us. Of those, the majority identified themselves as patients or patient advocates during registration. And we have representatives from the cancer community, cystic fibrosis, lupus, endometriosis, diabetes, liver disease, Tourette's, and representatives from communities and organizations that are focused on broad populations such as women's health, Hispanic health, and the disability community. In addition to the patients and patient advocates, we have a number of healthcare providers and researchers, and we just want to say we're thrilled that all of you have taken the time to join us. We think that it's a really dynamic and diverse group of participants. So here's the planned agenda for the web forum. We're going to start off by running through some housekeeping items, and then we're going to provide some background on the project, what we hope the project will accomplish, and we're going to provide an overview of some of the feedback we received after the first web forum, talk through some of the findings from the discussion period we had on web forum number 1, and then following these items, we're going to turn the program over to our guest speakers. They're going to share a bit about similar projects their organizations receive funding for from PCORI to set research priorities in the disease areas they work in. And then the remaining time is going to be devoted to receiving feedback from you that will help us establish principles for how to better align priority patient outcomes with personalized medicine treatment strategies and outcomes research, and also determine if any of the elements from our guest speakers' projects can help us achieve our goals. So a number of you joined us on the first web forum, so I'm guessing that you're pros at using the technology. But for those of you who want a refresher or are new to the web forum, we thought it would be helpful to get you acquainted with the WebEx functions. So right now your audio is muted upon entry, and you'll need to raise your hand to be unmuted. To raise your hand, open the Participants feature, and then select Raise Your Hand. There's a Raise Your Hand button. Your video webcam will be disabled. There'll be a Q&A and polling features that are enabled, and these are located on the sidebar on the screen, and we're going to use them during the discussion period. If you need any technical assistance at any point during today's web forum, please contact us through that Q&A feature or email ddavenport@personalizedmedicinecoalition.org. Just so you know, the web forum is going to be recorded. It'll be archived for future viewing and dissemination, and we already have the web forum 1 recording on PMC's website. And to view that one, and then once we upload this current recording tomorrow, you'll just need to go to personalizedmedicinecoalition.org and then click on the research tab at the top of the homepage. So some of you indicated during registration that you're familiar with personalized medicine, but we tend to get the question a lot, so we thought it would be important to set the stage. So what is personalized medicine? Personalized medicine is often referred to as precision medicine. It's an evolving field in which physicians use molecular diagnostic tests to determine which medical treatments will work best for their patients. But we define personalized medicine to also include combining that data from the tests with individuals' medical history, circumstances, and values that allow healthcare providers and patients to develop targeted treatment and prevention plans. In general, some of the benefits of personalized medicine are that it can shift the emphasis in medicine from reaction to prevention. It can direct targeted therapy and reduce trial and error treatment prescribing. It can reduce adverse drug reactions by identifying patients who are likely to experience them and determine the optimal dose. In some cases, it can increase patient adherence to treatment. It can reduce the need for high-risk invasive testing procedures, and in some cases, personalized medicine can help control the overall cost of healthcare by reducing unnecessary care. So for those of you who aren't PMC members, we've been around for 15 years. We have 230 members. A large number of these members are patients, providers, drug and diagnostic companies, health systems, and payers. The coalition came together to promote understanding and adoption of personalized medicine concepts, services, and products to benefit patients in the healthcare system. PMC is trying to advance the delivery of the benefits we mentioned when we ran through the last slide, but we know that can come from personalized medicine. But in reality, there's a lot of knowledge that still has to be gained to deliver these benefits consistency to all patients. So the PCORI project is helping us define where those knowledge gaps are from your perspective as patients, patient advocates, and caregivers. Together with you, we'll provide direction on where the research community's emphasis should be with respect to advancing personalized medicine. And we always have to put up this slide mentioning the type of engagement award that we received. The project was selected by the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute to receive a Eugene Washington Engagement Award because it's intended to establish partnerships and build community equipped to participate as partners in advancing patient-centered clinical effectiveness research. The Eugene Washington Engagement Award funding mechanism is specifically geared toward projects that encourage active integration of patients, caregivers, clinicians, other healthcare stakeholders, and integral members of the research enterprise. We're thankful to PCORI for their support, as well as the encouragement PMC has received for them over the last 2 years to make this project possible. So the title of the project, Moving Beyond Population Averages, Patient Principles for Personalized Medicine Research Agenda, is descriptive of what we hope to achieve. As an overview, the project includes 3 types of activities. The first is that we'll work with you to develop a set of patient-centered principles and a process to advance a personalized medicine research agenda during 4 web forums over the next year. The web forums are able to accommodate up to 70 or 100 participants, and right now we have 70 participating. We'll invite approximately 45 individuals from the patient, caregiver, research, and healthcare provider communities to an in-person roundtable in Washington, D.C., and at that meeting, the participants will take the principles you helped us develop and formulate them into a patient-centered outcomes research agenda. And then we'll publish the complete research agenda as a white paper by the summer of 2020. The research agenda will be made publicly available to inform future patient-centered outcomes research that will provide patients, caregivers, and clinicians with the evidence they need to make more informed healthcare decisions related to personalized medicine. So as you can see, the web forums are a really important part of this project. There are benefits and challenges to doing this virtually, so we want to make sure that we're addressing any issues participants see as barriers to engaging, and that's why we circulated an evaluation survey after the first web forum. We received responses to the survey from about 1/3 of the web forum participants, so we appreciate all of you who took the time to complete it. And we wanted to run through a bit about what we learned. On the positive side, a number of participants found the presentations informative and said they learned something new that they didn't know before the web forum. In terms of feedback on where we can improve, participants thought that the web forum was well organized but would like us to provide materials in advance. Participants felt that the tie-in with the guest speaker presentations should be made clearer, and participants would like more time for Q&A and discussion. And so we want you to know that we listened. We will circulate the evaluation survey more quickly after the web forum to increase the number of participants. And so David will be sending out that evaluation survey in the next day or 2. We have already, and we intend to continue circulating the agendas and slides and any background materials in advance of the web forums for the remaining 2 that we'll have after this. And then we took some more time to prepare the speakers in advance of the web forum today, and we hope to tie in specific examples from their presentations that we thought were intriguing and improving our own project during the discussion period that follows their presentations. And then we also lengthened the web forum overall to allow more time for Q&A and discussion. So we hope the changes will ensure that you have a better experience going forward. So about 2/3 of the folks joining today participated in the last web forum. Those of you who were a part of the web forum know that we had a discussion period at the end of the program. The polling questions were designed to help us better understand who was represented on the webinar, assess everyone's understanding and knowledge level, as well as their experience with personalized medicine, and give us your initial impressions on where our efforts with the project would be most impactful. And so the polling questions and discussion revealed a few things that we thought were interesting. Of the participants who responded to the polling questions, many reported that there was a personalized medicine treatment available for their disease or condition. Of those who reported an available personalized medicine treatment, most were not aware of it prior to their own diagnosis. When asked where information was received about personalized treatment options, the primary source that you identified was a patient advocacy organization. And the participants reported that it's important for physicians to consider a patient's values and circumstances when recommending a personalized medicine treatment strategy, but that they believe few resources were available to facilitate those types of discussions. So we'll build on some of these findings as a starting point later in the discussion period. From the initial findings and what we learned on the web forum today, PMC is going to try to narrow down the focus of our remaining web forums to focus only on those issues that you feel are research gaps. So now I have the pleasure of introducing our guest speakers for the web forum. They're Mary Jane Marchisotto and Paul Gross. Mary Jane is Senior Vice President of Research and International Operations at Food Allergy Research and Education. Before joining FAIR, Mary Jane spent more than 30 years in the financial services industry, including at JP Morgan Chase, Citibank, and Morgan Stanley, concentrating on financial management issues and on the development of internal best practices. Mary Jane was previously the Executive Director of the Food Allergy Initiative. She serves as co-chair of the European Academy of Allergy and Clinical Immunology's Patient Organization Committee and chair of the International Food and Anaphylaxis Alliance. Mary Jane's also a member of the American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology's Adverse Reactions Committee and is serving on the National Academy of Medicine's Sharing Clinical Trial Data Action Collaborative. Paul is chairman and founder of the Cerebral Palsy Research Network. He's a career software executive, having held positions at multiple public companies, including Microsoft and Borland. Paul has spent much of the last decade working on advancing the pace of medical research in neuroscience. Prior to founding the Cerebral Palsy Research Network, Paul was co-founder of the Hydrocephalus Clinical Research Network and an advisor to the Adult Hydrocephalus Clinical Research Network. Paul serves on the National Institutes of Neurological Diseases and Stroke Advisory Council and is co-chair of the Research Committee of the Hydrocephalus Association's Research Committee. So as you can tell from their bios, Mary Jane and Paul wear a number of hats, but all are relevant to the work that we're trying to do through this process. We're fortunate that they can join us today. Both FAIR and the CPRN conducted efforts to set research agendas in the areas of food allergy and cerebral palsy, and each organization received funding from PCORI for their prioritization efforts. Mary Jane and Paul give us an overview of their processes, talk about their successes, and share some best practices with us. So we'll start with Mary Jane's presentation and then turn it over to Paul. So Mary Jane.
Is that you, Mary Jane? All right, we're going to move to Paul. Paul, I'm going to unmute you. Are you on the line?
Okay. I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfectly.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for inviting me. As you heard, my name is Paul Gross, and I am the founder and chair of the Cerebral Palsy Research Network, or CPRN. I have a 14-year-old boy who has both hydrocephalus and cerebral palsy, and you got the rest of the background in introducing. Okay, if we can go to the next slide. So the Cerebral Palsy Research Network is a collaboration of a set of institutions, of physicians, therapists, patient advocates, and researchers all working towards advancing research for cerebral palsy. It was born out of an NIH workshop that I advocated for while I was on the NINDS Council that happened in November 2014. And there were 5 big takeaways from that meeting. The first was that we should start a national CP registry, that we should, pursue more comparative effectiveness research questions, and then those were the 2, really big things. And then there were some specific other things that need to happen, including increasing the study of the adult population and rejuvenating the field with more young scientists. CPRN was really founded to do 4 out of those 5. And it was the merger of my experience from co-founding the Hydrocephalus Clinical Research Network, or HCRN, and one of the other attendees of this NIH meeting who had a single center registry at Nationwide Children's Hospital. And because I'm the parent of a child with this condition, I started out with a patient-centered focus from the very outset. So Research CP is our project that was funded by PCORI, and it aimed to really figure out what the patient community cares about. So we formulated this research group called CPRN, and what we wanted to have is a research agenda that was really patient-centered. And so we found that, I found as a parent, and we found that generally that parent advocates and adults with CP found it very difficult to make decisions. There are so many interventions that can be done in cerebral palsy, and there's really very little research that compares the interventions and tells you which ones will work for you and your child or for you personally. And then the goal was to communicate what we learned to the medical professionals that conduct research, that conduct care, to the granting agencies, and overall to the insurance industry. I'm sorry, that was my next slide. So I'm hoping you advanced to Research CP. I'm going to try to.
You did.
So we should now if we can move on to Research CP objectives. So our PCORI application looked at the high level, similar to your work here. We had 4 objectives. One was to educate patients, caregivers, and clinicians so that we're all at one relative area of language. The second, and the thing I'll try to focus my most time on, is to survey the patient and provider community on what were the research priorities for people with cerebral palsy, to convene a workshop, to finalize that agenda, and then ultimately to publish it. So if we could move to the next slide. So while we set out with the objective to survey the patient community, patient and provider community, we actually stumbled upon a tremendous tool that we used to do this, because originally we thought we'd send out sort of a fixed survey with open-ended questions, and there was going to be a lot of work interpreting what that all meant. We found a tool called CodeDigital, which is an online platform for generating, prioritizing, and refining ideas. And so you see a screenshot of it here. We had 2 high-level questions that we seeded it with. One was, what do you believe is the most important research question to answer? And that was really targeted at the provider, clinical researcher crew. And then a second question, which is, what in your care and treatment do you want to see change to advance? And that was really aimed at being comfortable with the patient and caregiver community. And then what CodeDigital does is you enter one of these ideas, and it presents it to everyone that's joining in, and gives them a chance to vote on things comparatively, to edit them and have the edits be voted on. So it really encourages participation. It generates emails to bring people back in. So we had something like 26,000 votes from 200 engaged people that we used to generate a top list of what people care about. So this tool, and there are other tools like this, was a tremendous asset in pursuing our research agenda. So if we can move to the next slide. This is just a quote from one of our participants at our workshop. So we really learned about what adults wanted to learn about, and the key thing was they were experiencing these changes in their body that were like accelerated aging, and it was super important to them to understand if it was reversible, what could they do, and whatnot. And that really got at a topic that wasn't really known. So if we go to the next slide, this is a picture of one of our top researchers in the CP community talking about the importance of patient-centered research, and really why, if you do it in a patient-centered fashion, you get results and you study questions that are really important. And I'm sure you're all aware that most research happens because an investigator initiates it, and this is really part of the shift to saying, what's the community want? What would they need? What would they benefit from? And it produces, this is what's central to PCORI, but it was a great discussion to have. So if we go to the next slide, we had a set of common observations when we polled the 45 or 47 people that attended our meeting at the end. And there was a really strong desire on both sides, both from the clinical and clinical research community and from the CP community members, the caregivers and people with CP, to stay engaged in this partnership that we had formed over the course of a year. We did all of our webinars in 1 month. We did our face-to-face meeting 3 months later, and then it took us about another year to get our paper published with priorities. The second thing it got us to focus on was the importance of longitudinal studies. So, typical funding for research, allows for a 5-year window, and when you're done with sort of startup and enrollment, you really have 2-year outcomes you can measure, but these things we do for interventions with our kids really change their lives, 2 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later. It's really important to have an infrastructure to support that. It re-emphasized the importance of this adult perspective with this cascading loss of function. Multiple people found that fascinating. And then it really emphasized that from an outcome measure, instead of like, does the angle of your legs change from an intervention, does it change whether or not you can participate in activities in the community? So that was a big aha. If we can go to the next slide, we had some limitations. We didn't have an adolescent voice, and we are looking to fix that. Codigital favored very sort of motherhood and apple pie topics that would appeal to the most people and get the most votes. So we're going to do a follow-up where we do deeper dives. There's some selection bias associated with its online nature. It uses email and web access. And there is, while it does have some controls on this, there is some potential for it to be influenced by the participation of different groups, so different voices can have a stronger weight. But there are ways to manage that, and it handles a bunch of that. So one example, if we can move to the next slide, and almost done, one of the key things that has come from that is one of the investigators that was there has gotten funded for a precision medicine type of initiative, but first looking at just genetic causes of CP where there's an unknown etiology, but we think this is laying the groundwork for being able to do more precision medicine-oriented treatments. So finally, the key takeaways were that we really needed to create a space and an environment where patients and clinicians would, have mutual respect. We feel like we did a good job of that and create an open space for communication. I think it's important to plan for an iterative process so you don't just get these motherhood and apple pie ideas that everybody can agree to. And then lastly, to turn it into research, it was really important to partner with clinicians that had a track record for funded research so that we could take the ideas that came out of it and make them get funded. So that is what we did with Research CP and CPRN.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Paul. We're looking forward to talking about a few of the elements that you included in your project during this discussion period. And sorry again about the fact that you couldn't view your slides, but you did an excellent job. I think we were able to overcome that. We're going to pause briefly and see if there are any questions for Paul. And again, if you have a question and you want to be unmuted, just raise your hand and we'll go ahead and unmute your line, or you can type a question into the Q&A box. Any questions? All right. While we're waiting for them to come in, I actually had a question for you, Paul, about codigital. I know you mentioned that, you felt that process, you needed to delve a bit deeper into some of the questions that you asked, and that's one of the elements of your project that we're going to talk about later during the discussion period. Do you have a sense of the types of issues that you felt that you needed to probe a little bit deeper on that you plan to include?
Yeah, there are several things, but in general, what happened is the research questions ended up getting phrased where they loaded sort of multiple sort of things that you would want to stratify by into the question, and so they became a little too general. And so there are areas where, there's sort of a severity index for people with CP that's about their gross motor capabilities. We know that we want to dive into the people that are non-ambulatory versus the people that are ambulatory much more deeply because their life course is very different. there's a set of people that have intellectual disabilities and have hence communication issues, and we think it's an important deep dive to do there. So those are just some examples, and then we feel like the team voice was lost, and so but it was really those areas where the questions were phrased in a way that they incorporated as many people as possible, so everybody voted for them. And you really need to get to a research question, you need to break them down a little further.
Great. That's really helpful. And we did have one question come in from a participant in the Q&A box, and I'll read it. The question was, how does personalization play a role in the research that's being done in cerebral palsy? And is there a sequencing component that you're aware of that you can share with the group?
So Dr. Michael Brewer is doing spit hits with 500 patients, study participants that get referred to him, and we're doing sequencing. And then what we're doing is taking the data that is in our registry, which is actually gathered through the medical record and some customized forms in the EMR to gather data specific to CP. So we're going to do both a phenotypic analysis of the data from the registry and compare it to the genomic data from the patients.
That's great. And then the registry, do you know, is it gathering medical data?
So it's gathering, we capture both patient-reported outcomes and clinical data. So we have about 400 fields. They're not all filled out on they're kind of encounter-based. So if you're having a surgery, we capture things about that. If you're doing an annual clinic visit, we capture data about that that get captured. So that's clinical data, and then we compare that with patient-reported outcomes, both from the EMR, from things like MyChart, as well as a web portal where we gather patient-reported outcomes.
Terrific.
I don't think I answered the question about personalization does it play. We're viewing this initial sequencing and phenotypic data as the basis for some follow-on research as to we can look at outcomes of interventions based on these biological markers and these clinical markers to determine whether or not an intervention would be most effective for one population or another.
Right, and then Jane, we're going to try to unmute your line so you could ask your question. Yep.
Sure.
You can ask her.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Hi, it's Jane Banger. Paul, thanks so much for the great presentation. I have a question. Through your work, have you come away with any specific things you wouldn't do again that might inform our work?
Okay, I think it was a very effective first step. There's not really anything that I wouldn't do. It's these things that I would do more of, which is I think I would have planned it to be a multi-stage, like get these first set of questions and then get a second set of questions. If I could do it again, I would have gone for the 2-year PCORI award and would have shot to have done it in phases. And I think I would have gotten closer to research questions as opposed to sort of research areas of interest. And so that's what I would have done differently, but it's more additive as opposed to subtractive.
I like get her slides up. That's perfect. Thanks, Paul. We don't have any additional questions, so if you'd like to go on mute or if you have to drop off at a certain point, please feel free to do so. Thank you again.
Okay.
Thanks. And Mary Jane, we believe we found you and have unmuted your line. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Terrific. We can hear you, and I have your slides up and we'll advance them for you.
Okay, that's terrific. First of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to speak, and thank you for all the participants for listening to me. What I'd like to do today is tell you a little bit about the background process that we went through at Food Allergy Research and Education on our PCORI award. So if you go to page 2, you'll see that our PCORI awarded us a 2-year grant effective May 1, 2016. And the goal, simply put, was to bring the patient voice to the prioritization of food allergy research. In order to do that, we conducted an RFP inviting individuals to apply to become members of the board. In a month's time, we had 5 times the number of really incredibly qualified candidates to participate with us for available spots. We worked closely with our medical advisory board to decide, using some preset criteria, who would be invited to participate. Next slide, please. We constituted the board of I actually increased it. Originally, it was to be 44 key stakeholders, and we grew it to be about 50. Each board was multidisciplinary in nature, including patients, caregivers, school nurses, clinicians, research scientists, individuals from insurance companies and pharmacy benefit management plans, and food allergy advocates. We are organized on regional basis to have a Northeast board, a South board, a Midwest board, and a West board. Next page, please. The common denominator, I should say, is that each of the members of the boards were either directly affected by food allergies or had a family member who was directed by food allergies, other than the research scientists who are obviously just working in the field. Next page on the ORAD process should read. What we did from a process perspective was we had FAIR staff members facilitating conversations. We initially asked key opinion leaders in the field to come in and educate all of the members of the boards through a series of in-person regional quarterly meetings and supplemented by monthly national board conference calls. After educating everyone, we asked the regional boards to work independently to draft white papers identifying the top 5 to 6 research perspectives, priorities that were important from their perspective. The groups worked independently, as I said, to draft the pages, the documents. There were lead authors in each case, but it was a collaborative effort of each group. So roughly between 10 and 12 people working together for each region. Those papers were submitted to us in about March, April of the end of the first year. I then shared them with all of the other boards, and they came together for their first national in-person meeting to coincide with an annual research retreat that they are sponsors for key opinion leaders, research scientists, government regulators, and industry. That first meeting took place in April 2017. And the boards, as I said, came together. They'd all read each other's papers. We had a facilitated day-long meeting where we broke into breakout groups and identified the priorities that were that they wanted to present to the attendees at the research retreat. Next page, please. Those priorities were to focus on therapeutic developments, both preventative and curative, and to understand treatment of reactions, to improve diagnostic processes, both for accuracy and safety and ease of testing, to improve product labeling, and to address quality of life issues. The members of the Research Advisory Board presented the priorities, again, to the attendees. There were about 125 key leaders in the field, including, as I said, industry regulators, specifically the NIH, the FDA, and pharmaceutical companies and patient advocates. Next page, please. we had, at the end of the first year of the grant, the 2-year grant award, we largely had accomplished the goals that we set out for 2 years. So we decided the group decided that they would do 2 things. One, they would take a deep dive into the psychosocial issues, the quality of life issues, recognizing that it was an enormous unmet need and one that was poorly understood. So they were going to do a lot of work on the psychosocial and also to focus on broad dissemination and implementation of our findings. Next page, please. The way that we went about getting information on the psychosocial needs was to conduct a survey of our FAIR clinical network members. You should have before you a map of the United States, which shows about then I think 29 members of our clinical network across the country. Today that number is 31 going to 33 in a couple of days. These are centers that have applied to us for designation as a center of excellence. The application is online. You can look at it on our website. And the centers were established to do 2 things. One, to identify centers of excellence, centers where individuals and families could go and get proper diagnostic and care. And 2, that the centers could be centers for late-stage clinical trials, of which there are 2 that are currently underway in food allergies. We did a survey, as I said, had phenomenal results. 29 of the then 30 centers responded. What it said was it confirmed that the standard of care in food allergies today is I hope you all know, is basically avoidance, and in the event of a accidental exposure, to take epinephrine and go to the emergency room. There's been a growing recognition that standard of care is not only expensive, time-consuming, is extraordinarily stressful. That leads to a very low quality of life among the affected population. The survey indicated that although there was enormous need for psychosocial services within our centers of excellence, there was really very scarce resources available. Specifically, of the 30 centers, of the 29 centers, 3 had psychologists available, 1 a psychiatrist, and 2 social workers. So we have identified a need. We are continuing to develop educational programs now to try to assess that. Next page, please. You should have before you a list of accomplishments and implementation accomplishments in the 2nd year of our program. We, as I said, in addition to focusing on the psychosocial issues, we also wanted to do broad dissemination. The way we did that was through publications. We had 2 peer-reviewed journals accepted in leading scientific journals. One is has recently been submitted, and another is in the draft. We had publications in 4 non-peer-reviewed journals, i.e. the popular media. Members of the group presented at 6 major academic conferences in the United States and in Europe, at 7 professional conferences and 2 lay conferences. We additionally had abstracts and posters presented at those conferences. And importantly, even though the award ended in May of this year, of 2018, the work of the group continues. These advocates are working with us in our education and advocacy areas, working with us as we are growing our patient registry. And Paul, I'd love to talk to you at some point about yours. We continue to work closely with our clinical network sites on trying to develop various educational tools, and they will be on the opening panel of our research retreat in April of this year. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time, and I'd be delighted to answer any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you so much, Mary Jane. And we will give folks a moment to ask any questions. And just like after Paul's presentation, if you have a question, you can either type it into the Q&A box so we all can see it, or raise your hand and we'll unmute your line. Okay. And Mary Jane, we just want to thank you as well, not just for presenting on the webinar, but we have also had a number of your advocates who've been engaged in your project express interest in participating in our own efforts. So you've, I think, inspired them to not just engage with the food allergy community, but also people outside of that, and participate in larger efforts. So we thank you.
I did ask them, and we're delighted that this contact is made, and we'd love to continue to work with you. And as I said, they're working with these individuals over the last 2 years has been incredibly rewarding. They're just highly motivated and terrific people.
Great. We did have a couple of questions come in. The first, through the Q&A box, the questions related to how did you all get engagement from the Centers of Excellence?
So the Centers of Excellence are primarily, but not exclusively, academic centers that have applied to us through an online application on our website for membership in the FAIR Clinical Network. That application asks them to identify the resources that they have available at the center, both human capital as well as real estate, space, and equipment, to define the operating procedures that they have in place, to certify to us that they're using state-of-the-art guidelines and procedures. The question was how did we get them to work with us? Not unlike the patient advocates who worked with us on the RAB, the members of our clinical network are, by and large, incredibly engaged with this community, and enjoy collaborating with us. And I think it's a mutual benefit. They see benefit in being members of the network, and are constantly looking for ways, and we're constantly looking for ways to engage with them. If I didn't answer the question, maybe try it again.
Great. No, I believe you did.
Okay.
Lawrence, we're going to unmute your line so you could ask your question, but then we'll just have to place you back on mute to avoid the echo during response.
Okay.
Go ahead.
My question is about how we can make sure that innovations in personalized medicine are freely available and that there are no problems with access and cost, given that many of the innovations will arise through for-profit research entities or public-private partnerships and will probably be patented.
That's an excellent question. I'm not sure that any of us on the line are equipped to answer that question, with the exception of, one of the questions that came up on our last webinar was related to the context with which targeted personalized treatment options are made available to patients, and that considerations beyond just the biological differences were the ones that scored most highly to patients. And while this project can't focus specifically on costs, tools that were improving conversations between providers and patients, the patients believed should be informed by a person's ability to access those types of treatments and services financially. So that may provide some insights in how we, hope that will help overcome those barriers. Okay. And Mary Jane, it does appear that you did answer that question correctly because the person who asked it just thanked you. So, and thank you so much for joining. I think we'll put you back on mute and move on. So
yeah, I have to drop off. But again, thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to talking to you soon again.
Great. It's been a pleasure.
Bye.
Okay. So we're going to move on to the discussion portion of the webinar, and we'll run through these questions and give you a couple of minutes to respond to each of them. Where we plan to start the discussion is to drill down a little deeper in some of the findings from the first web forum to see if our understanding of what we received back in terms of feedback was correct, and if we're still on track given the discussion that we've had today. And you should have the polling questions come up on your screen. You'll be able to select responses, and then there'll be some questions for discussion. What those are short response questions, so you should be able to type in your responses to those as well. So we'll start with the first question. On the first web forum, we had used the definition of patient caregiver values to be personal priorities, religious and spiritual values, societal and cultural values, including family involvement in care decisions, views around quality of life, and beliefs about health and personal responsibility. Do you agree that this is an accurate definition of patient and caregiver values? Yes or no? Okay. Okay. Great. It's going to close out in about 15 seconds, but the results are coming in.
It's frozen until it comes through.
Okay. Okay. It does not appear that we had any no responses to that question. So 72%
yes.
We had 72% of you actually responded to the question with a yes. So we will take that as we were on the right track. But if you did decide that you wanted to give some more thought to that question and have other factors that you think we need to consider in that definition, we'll circulate these questions after the webinar as well, so you can provide some responses there. So I'm actually going to go back. I started with the answer to the second question. So on our last forum, the participants reported that it was important for physicians to consider patients' values and circumstances when recommending personalized medicine treatment strategy. The participants on that web forum noted that the research agenda would be most helpful if it focused on research priorities that were aimed at helping providers identify and communicate treatment options based on biological differences, but in the context of patient and caregiver values, and understanding patient and caregiver circumstances and presenting treatment options in ways that highlight how a treatment aligns or doesn't align with those circumstances. we're just, surveying a larger group of you and want to be sure that the research guiding healthcare provider communication should be a primary focus of PMC's research agenda. So if you think that should be a primary focus or should not be a primary focus, please click yes or no. Over the presenting?
He's done.
Okay.
Close that.
Give me a little bit more time. Okay, we're going to give it another 30 seconds. We have a little over half folks responding. Okay, it seems like there's a bit of disagreement there, and at least two respondents think that we should include other factors and focus for our research agenda. So we're going to put up a short response, and you can let us know what you were thinking as who should be a focus for the research agenda beyond healthcare provider communities. Here it is. Okay. Since I already asked question number 2, I'm going to move on to question number 3. On the last web forum, we defined patient caregiver circumstances to be emotional state, economic state, as I mentioned earlier, access to care, social support, cognitive abilities, attitude toward illness, relationship with healthcare providers, and role of patient as a caretaker themselves. Do you agree that this is an accurate definition when we're thinking about patient caregiver circumstances? And this will be a yes or no. And if we have no responses, we'll have a short response question to see what other factors we need to consider for that definition. Okay, we're going to close it out in 15 seconds, but it does appear that we had about 4 participants who said that there were other factors that we should consider under patient and caregiver circumstances. So if you can just, when we put up the short response, type in your response of what you think that we should consider moving forward in that definition. That would be great. We'd appreciate it. Okay, we are going to move on to question number 4. On today's web forum, you heard from FAIR about their organization's project to establish a research agenda for food allergy. FAIR used a structured process for soliciting applications and selecting members for their project advisory committee. PMC's own project, we initially thought that we would just allow people who expressed interest in the project to volunteer their interest in participating in the advisory board, but we thought that it was interesting when we spoke to FAIR that they used a much broader request for participation process and evaluation. So we're asking at this point, should PMC follow a similar process to soliciting applications and selecting members of our own advisory committee, similar to what FAIR did? It's just a yes or no. All right. We're ready to close that out. And that was pretty unanimous, so thank you. Looks like that is something we will do. So thank you, FAIR, for that suggestion. The 5th question is just thinking toward this advisory committee, just to ensure that we have a focus on the research agenda that's consistent with what you're thinking. We wanted to get a sense from you. We have 45 people that we would include in that advisory committee. And so we were wondering, just to make sure that the gaps that we're filling in treatment decision-making are aligned with patient-caregiver values and circumstances, what of the following stakeholder groups do you believe that we should include? And there will be an other option on the poll as well. It's not a priority polling, it's just click all that apply. Looks like we're just waiting on 4 more people at this point, so we'll close it out after that. Yeah. And it looks like 7 of you indicated that there are other stakeholders that we may not have included on our list. So we're going to open a short question for you to include what stakeholder groups you were thinking that we should include. So that should be opening right now. So if you can type your responses, that would be helpful. Okay. Okay, closing out in 7 seconds. All right. So during today's web forum, you heard from the CPRN about their project to establish a research agenda for CP. The CPRN used an online voting system, what they were referring to as co-digital, to build consensus around the priority research areas to pursue through their research network. We view these questions as sort of our first pass at narrowing down to some priority areas of focus, but given that there's interest in involving a number of different stakeholders in the agenda setting process, do you think PMC should consider incorporating a similar consensus building mechanism like Code Digital to further vet the principles that we're developing together through the web forum? Just a yes or no. We're going to give it another 30 seconds and then we'll close it out. But that's pretty unanimous as well that we should probably look into a system like that. I'm going to close it. Given that was one of Paul's regrets of what they could have done differently, I think that was a good element for them to share. So thank you for your feedback on that. And then we're just going to have one final question, and it'll be a short answer question that we'll leave open for a minute or two. Are there other elements of the FAIR and CPRN projects that you think that PMC should adopt as part of our process to set a research agenda? You know, I know that there were some questions that came up related to the incorporation of EMRs and also involvement of centers of excellence. So anything along those lines that sort of came up as you heard of the examples, we would welcome your feedback on that. Okay. We're going to give it another 30 seconds, and then we'll close out that question. And just so you're aware, if for some reason you did have, I know at least one person let us know that they had some issues selecting from the multi-choice question with stakeholders. We will be circulating these questions after the web forum, so if you do want to complete your answer to that question and weren't able to before, we'll be able to identify you with the responses you gave here and what you submit afterwards. So, you know, we're sorry that you had some issues, but we will be able to log your response if you'd like to do that. Great. Okay. Well, we really appreciate all of the responses we got from you. Similar to what we did today, we will be giving an overview of the responses we received and how we've incorporated feedback moving forward. Our next webinar is not until late spring, early summer, so we're considering circulating a summary of some of these responses we received in the interim and potentially having our next web forum not include a guest speaker to be more of an opportunity for us to drill down on the principles that you know, we've sort of been formulating with your feedback. You're going to receive an evaluation survey for this web forum, and we'd encourage you to fill it out. With some of the technical challenges we had today, we'll be sure to work on those. But if there's anything else in addition to your feedback on technical challenges that you'd like to share with us, we really do try to incorporate that as much as we can to make sure that it's a good experience for you. we'll take the feedback in the discussion session and use it as a basis to formulate sort of that interim web forum that I was talking about in May and early June. And then we will be posting the recording from today as well as the slides and access to the other web forum and slides on our website. And again, you just go to personalizedmedicinecoalition.org and click on the research tab at the top. We are continuing to grow outreach for this group of participants. We had about the same number of participants on this webinar, and 2/3 were participants from the previous web forum. We did have some participants for the first web forum let us know that this date and time didn't work for them. So our group is growing. If you have anyone at your organization who you think would be beneficial for us to add, or you just have someone who you think would benefit from participating or that we would benefit from having their participation, we would love to hear from you. And then we did get a number of emails after the last web forum just with ideas that we should be thinking about in the next phase of the project, and we encourage that. So we are going to include our contact information if you don't have it already. Please feel free to email me or David or both of us, or call us. We do enjoy talking to all of you. And with that, we will actually close a couple of minutes early. And we thank you all for joining us, and we hope you have a great afternoon. Take care.